20% again, Luke. The teacher's voice cracked, brittle with exhaustion, as she slid the test paper across his desk. Red ink bled over the page like fresh wounds. A ripple of laughter echoed through the classroom, and someone at the back muttered, "Mr. Chin strikes again." Luke smirked, but deep inside, a flicker of doubt stirred. His classmates laughed at his failures, yet none dared challenge the weight of his surname. The Chin fortune was both his shield and his prison. Luke leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, lips curling into a defiant smirk. He bore the relentless crown of failure, and in wearing it, defied all shame. Grades meant nothing, not when his last name was a golden key, opening doors before he even knocked. Luke had everything: wealth, privilege, and a mother who ruled the world of finance as a billionaire CEO. Yet his material privilege conflicts with his intellectual poverty. Inside the classrooms of Portland High, the heir to Cherry Chin's empire floundered, drowning in the vast, uncharted ocean of learning. He was being pulled ever deeper by the relentless tide of mediocrity. His grades were abysmally low, his teachers were weary of him, and his classmates were the targets of his scorn. Everyone had given up on him, his teachers, his kin, even his own mother. Each morning, as Luke was chauffeured to school, a ragged figure lingered nearby the gates, quietly observing. Beneath an almond tree, he sat, pounding nuts with a stone and muttering to himself. Most students hurried past, their heads down, tossing stones or jeers his way. Luke never looked at him. To Luke, the madman was no one, just another homeless soul, drifting aimlessly from place to place, a shadow at the edge of his perfect life. Until the day that the madman muttered words that struck Luke harder than any stone ever thrown. Luke was the only son of Cherry Chin, a strong, resourceful black woman of unshakable virtue, a formidable billionaire. She had transformed her late husband's small supermarket into brighter future, a private investment empire. In Jamaica's business world, her name commanded both fear and reverence. While Luke dined on silverware and marble floors, he starved in silence where it mattered most, his mind. While he was chauffeured to and from school, the other children took route taxis or walked. He lacked nothing except brilliance. At 12, he entered Portland High, not by merit, but by a single phone call from his mother. His surname was his passport. But if the school's outer walls honored Jamaica's national heroes, within its classrooms, Luke was notorious for three things: arrogance, privilege, and failure. He had failed every subject: mathematics, English, history. Each report a stark testament to his struggles, with every subject clearly marking his failures. Teachers detested him, but dared not expel the Chin heir. Their fear of losing the family's donations silenced them. Because of his privilege and swagger, or perhaps because of ignorance and arrogance, he had no friends. Luke, meanwhile, smirked through lessons as if knowledge were beneath him. In one meeting with the principal, after another string of F's, Luke leaned back in the leather chair and crossed his arms. "I don't need an education," he declared. "I'll employ someone who does. No grade here is higher than my family fortune." The words hung in the air like smoke. The principal said nothing. Home offered no refuge. Cherry Chin was still wrapped in silk, a woman who demanded perfection. That evening, as Luke tossed another failing report onto her mahogany desk, she read it without expression, her eyes cold as obsidian. "You're an embarrassment," she said at last, her voice a blade. "I built an empire from nothing. And this is the heir I'm left with?" Luke folded his arms, rolling his eyes. "But you've no other children." "I wish I did," Cherry answered. "At least one with a brain." Her words cut deeper than she knew, but Luke masked the sting with his trademark smirk. He believed he needed no education, no approval, no redemption. Yet his true schooling was waiting for him, not in the polished halls of Portland High, nor in the shadow of his mother's empire, but in the ramblings of a man everyone else dismissed as mad. "You're 16 now," Cherry said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "No more childish excuses." Cherry sighed, her gaze burning into him. "Can you imagine a brainless CEO of an investment company just handed the reins? That will never happen. The business world would tear you apart, leave you bankrupt, broke, and humiliated. You would destroy everything your father and I built. Either you become smarter, or you'll be just another spoiled child born into money, only to die in poverty. You will dishonor our family name. And hear me, Luke, if you don't prove you have what it takes, I'll give this company to charity before I leave it to you. You'll inherit nothing, not a cent more than you deserve. The silence that followed slapped him harder than any hand could. Cherry wasn't bluffing. She never bluffed. She was dead serious. Cherry remembered the bitter contempt she and Robert suffered, whispers that cut like knives, heavy stares filled with judgment, and the sneering scorn of a society that recoiled at a Chinese man marrying a black woman. Every glance, every hushed comment tested their courage and love. Now, watching Luke waste his opportunities, she felt the sting of betrayal, as if all their sacrifices, the battles they had fought, the prejudice they faced, were being discarded by the very son they hoped would honor their legacy. At that moment, she wished more than ever that Robert was still alive to guide him, to be the father Luke needed to become the man they had envisioned. The next morning, Luke walked into school as if nothing had happened. His chauffeur pulled up in the sleek black Benz, and Luke stepped out, head high, striding through the gates like a prince surveying his kingdom. Some students stared in envy, others in open disgust. Only one pair of eyes didn't shift with the crowd's moods. Across the road, an unkempt man, hair matted, clothes hanging in tatters, was perched beneath an ackee tree, plucking its fruit. His appearance was repulsive, his presence haunting. Luke never even noticed him. To him, the man was invisible, just the madman who scavenged and muttered to himself while the world ignored him. But school was no escape. Each test shredded Luke like rags on barbed wire. Every subject, failure. Every mark, rock bottom. And Cherry kept her word. His allowances shrank, his chauffeur vanished, and the sleek Benz was replaced with a crowded route taxi. For the first time in his life, Luke felt the weight of being ordinary. One morning, trudging up the hill to school, he noticed the rough-looking man wearing ragged clothes seated beneath an almond tree, pounding a nut against a stone. The man's eyes, distant yet unnervingly clear, flicked toward him. Without looking up fully, he muttered, "Never forget that intelligence rules the world, and ignorance carries the burden. Therefore, remove yourself as far as possible from ignorance, and seek as far as possible to be intelligent." Luke slowed, his brow furrowed. "What did you just say?" The words did not sound like muttering. They struck like prophetic warnings, as though the very air had grown heavy with them. For the first time, Luke felt a chill about his future, not as a chin, but as a boy destined for failure. The man lifted his head, calm, as though reciting scripture. Marcus Garvey's words, "Intelligence rules the world, ignorance carries the burden. The man who cannot develop and use his mind is bound to be the slave of the man who does." Most students avoided him, afraid even to walk too close. But Luke didn't move away. He looked down at the ragged stranger with the first flicker of something new in his eyes, curiosity. The man chuckled, the sound low, almost knowing. "Garvey's philosophies are prophecy, boy, like Holy Writ, but you don't understand them, not yet." Something in the man's words lodged itself in Luke's mind. He turned and walked away, his swagger gone, replaced by something unfamiliar. Humility. As he climbed the school steps, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, the words repeated in his head like a reggae beat. "Never forget that intelligence rules the world, and ignorance carries the burden. Remove yourself from ignorance. Seek intelligence." That morning in class, Luke sat in silence, watching his classmates engage with the teacher. They nodded, answered, and scribbled notes. They were part of the rhythm of the lesson. He was outside it, as always, but this time his distance felt different. The teacher didn't bother with him. No one expected anything from Luke Chin. That afternoon, his history teacher set a test. Luke stared at the blank sheet. His eyes darted across the room, everyone else calm, pens moving, brows furrowed with thought. His page remained empty. The results of the week came crashing down. Maths, 15%. English, 20%. Science, 17%. Social studies, 22%. Geography, a solid 0. He even failed PE, a final, almost absurd testament to how far behind he was. No subject seemed safe from his poor performance, and his teachers often shook their heads in disbelief, while other students excelled in academics, sports, or both. Luke's failures were constant, a reminder that privilege alone could not shield him from the consequences of neglecting his own learning. For the first time, failure didn't feel funny, it felt like quicksand. The school guidance counselor called him in. She folded her hands neatly on the desk, her tone measured but firm. "Luke, you are seriously underperforming. Academically and behaviorally, you should not be here. You're far below average. By rights, you should have been expelled a long time ago." Luke shifted in his chair. The words came out before he knew where they came from. "I'm going to change that." Her brow lifted. "How?" "Your mother has hired private tutors, expensive ones. None of them could reach you." That silenced him. She sighed and dismissed him early, telling him to go home and think about his future. As Luke left the compound, descending the hill, he saw the man again. His filthy clothes hung in tatters, threadbare and stained, yet he sat with unwavering focus, cross-legged on a smooth rock beneath the almond tree. An old, crumpled newspaper spread before him like a sacred text. Luke stopped, hesitating, then stepped closer. "You said something last time about Marcus Garvey." The man folded the newspaper with care, his movements slow, almost ceremonial. He looked up. "You remember it?" "Yeah," Luke said. "It stuck with me. For a madman to be quoting Garvey's philosophy." The man crossed his arms, his eyes narrowing. "Madman, eh?" Luke's cheeks flushed. "Sorry, I didn't mean..." The man chuckled softly. "They say I'm mad. I understand, but madness..." He paused, his gaze sharp now. "Madness is simply thinking differently from the standard. Yes, I am mad, but so are many others. Only they wear fine suits and drive fancy cars. The difference is, my madness lets me read things others ignore. Like your body language, boy, that mask of arrogance. The truth is clear. You've never cared for school." The man's eyes lingered on him, unflinching. "I saw you dropped off and picked up by chauffeurs in expensive cars. A boy with everything. Yet the one thing he refuses is the most important thing of all. Education. Your privilege, your Afro-Chinese looks, your wealth. None of it matters when knowledge is the true priority," he said. The words struck Luke harder than any insult he had ever received. He bit his cheek, the impact deeper than he expected. "Where did you learn all this philosophy?" he asked quietly, his voice tinged with curiosity and a hint of awe. The man paused, then answered quietly, "From discarded books," as though wisdom could be salvaged from what the world had thrown away. Luke stared at him, as though the blow of revelation had split open the very faculties of his mind. The ragged figure before him, a madman, once only a source of curiosity and ridicule, suddenly seemed vast, a repository of knowledge no textbook nor teacher had ever offered. A quiet awe settled over Luke, a recognition that wisdom could live in the most unexpected places. The man's mind carried more than mere knowledge, hidden in the margins of abandoned pages. His voice carried the gravity of lived pain. "I didn't just learn philosophy. I've learned lessons life carved into me. Lessons that can lift a boy drowning in failure to the pinnacle of higher learning. A strong and free mind must be built on a solid foundation of education. Life is more than material things, more than wealth. Some treasures reveal themselves only after the pursuit of knowledge. To rise to the greatest heights of human understanding, one must be guided by intelligence and by moral strength." Luke had never heard anyone speak to him like this. Not teachers, not tutors, not even his own mother. For the first time, someone's words reached into his soul, stirred something buried, and woke the quiet hunger of his reasoning mind. "Teach me then," Luke whispered. "Help me, please." The man studied him, his eyes narrowing as if to measure the boy's sincerity. Then his voice shifted, carrying a quiet pride. "Do you even know who I was?" Luke blinked. "Who were you?" "I was captain of Titchfield High's first school challenge quiz team to win. I was the first youth from Portland to win the national spelling bee. I graduated with the top CXC results in Jamaica. That earned me a full scholarship to the University of the West Indies." Luke's mouth fell open. "What? Then, what happened?" Morris's smile faded, his gaze drifting past Luke to the horizon. "That's a story for another day. For now, you must decide if you're serious. Knowledge won't bend itself to arrogance." The man studied him with eyes that saw past the arrogance, past the name, into the boy himself. "One condition," he said slowly. "Devotion, discipline, no excuses, no procrastination." Luke nodded, almost desperate. "That's fine. I just can't keep failing. The next morning, before the first light stretched across the blue mountains, Luke rose. His mother still slept, unaware. He moved quietly, showered, dressed, and packed his bag. For the first time, he gripped his school books as if they were sacred. By the almond tree near the school gates stood the madman's shack, cobbled together from scraps of wood and rusted zinc, leaning like a broken spine. Through a gap, Luke saw him sprawled on the dirt floor. No mattress, no sheet, no comfort, but sleep itself. Luke hesitated, fear pricking him. What if the man woke wild, struck out, forgot his promise? But he swallowed the fear, stepped forward, and nudged him gently with his foot. The man stirred, turned his head slowly, and looked up at him. His eyes, though tired, were calm, unbroken. Luke's heart trembled. "Hey, you said you would teach me. Remember?" The man sat up, his voice low, deliberate. "I remember. But listen, boy. Learning is no easy road. It will break you before it builds you. Unless you're truly willing, unless you surrender your pride, no knowledge can enter." "I am willing," Luke said firmly. "I can see that," the man muttered, glancing up at the morning mist hovering over the distant sea. His eyes softened, as if weighing the sincerity in Luke's gaze. His voice shifted, steady now. "First lesson, be of good manners," he said, his tone firm but patient. "Next time, say good morning, or use the appropriate greeting for the time of day." Luke nodded, absorbing the lesson, a mix of humility and curiosity in his expression. "Second lesson, my name is Morris Brown." Luke nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Okay, Morris. My name is Luke Chin." Luke. Morris rolled the name on his tongue, then fixed his eyes on him. "How long have you been going to school here?" 4 years, Luke replied. "Can you read?" Morris asked, his voice calm but edged with authority, making Luke straighten up. "Yes," Luke muttered, suddenly defensive. "I can read, but I don't always understand what I read." Morris nodded slowly. "So your problem is not reading. It's your heart. You don't want to. You see reading as punishment, not power. That must change. You must learn to love it, to chase it, because knowledge is the foundation of freedom, self-reliance, and dignity. Learning is limitless. It doesn't end with school or books. It is a lifelong journey toward wisdom." His voice sharpened, his eyes fierce now. Marcus Garvey said it plain: read, 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 and never stop until you discover the knowledge of the universe. The words struck Luke like thunder. For the first time, he felt knowledge not as a burden, but as a weapon, and perhaps a key. Morris leaned back, his eyes steady. "Every morning, 1 hour before class, every afternoon after school, you'll meet me here. We'll sit and you'll learn, not just to read, but to understand." Luke nodded. And so the pattern began, the privileged boy and the ragged man. Each morning Luke arrived early, his books under his arm. Morris guided him patiently, reviewing yesterday's lessons before building upon them. Slowly, the words on the page stopped blurring. Reading no longer felt like a punishment. It became a key. He learned not only to read, but to comprehend, to memorize, to hold knowledge in his mind like treasure. One afternoon beneath the almond tree, while Luke read aloud, Richard passed by with a group of boys. Phones lifted, snickers spread. "Look at him," Richard jeered. "Mr. Chin getting lessons from the madman." That evening, a video flooded WhatsApp groups and Instagram feeds. Luke, heir to Cherry Chin's empire, sitting cross-legged on the rock, reading beside a ragged man. The caption burned: "Rich Chinese boy takes free lessons from the madman." Laughter followed him through the corridors the next morning. Students nudged, pointed, whispered. Even some teachers shook their heads. But Luke did not break. He opened his textbook at lunch, alone, their jeers buzzing like flies. Morris's words anchored him. "Don't waste precious time on insignificant people. Fix your eyes on your work, not on theirs." For the first time, ridicule no longer pierced him. It sharpened him. That evening, Cherry stood waiting at the front door, her face like a storm. In her hand was the semester's report. "I am sick of this," she said coldly, "sick and fed up. This is your final warning, Luke. Turn things around, or else." Luke stared at her. For once, he didn't roll his eyes, didn't smirk. He said nothing, but inside, determination surged. He would prove himself. But an even greater test awaited, one of mental strength, and momentarily he felt himself faltering. One afternoon, overwhelmed by jeers and the endless climb from failure, Luke slammed his books shut. "What's the point?" he muttered, on the verge of quitting. Morris only stared, his voice low but sharp. "Then you proved them right, that money makes you weak. Which will you choose, Luke Chin? Weakness or greatness?" Luke's fists clenched, nails digging into his palms. The words cut deeper than any jeer, but instead of breaking him, they lit something fierce inside. Slowly, deliberately, he reopened the book, his eyes burning with renewed determination. The next afternoon, as the deciduous almond trees showered their seasonal leaves like red and golden rain, Morris sat unusually quiet. Then his voice dropped, low and heavy, carrying a weight that made Luke lean forward, every sense straining to catch the words about to come. "My uncle once told my mother, if you think your boy will outshine my son, you're mistaken." Luke looked up from his notebook. "What do you mean?" Morris's jaw clenched. Days later, something changed. My mind began to unravel. Focus, memory, everything I had, gone. Just like that. Luke leaned closer, unsettled. "But why? How?" Morris shook his head, eyes clouding. "Another day, boy. You'll hear the rest another day." Months passed. When the next report arrived, Cherry's eyes widened as she read. The grades weren't perfect, but they were drastically better, remarkably so. A few teachers even left glowing remarks about his effort. For the first time, she felt pride instead of shame. That evening, she sat Luke down, suspicion in her voice. "Who's been helping you?" Luke froze. His first instinct was silence, but something inside whispered, "Don't hide, Morris." "Morris," he said at last. Cherry's brow arched. "And who is Morris?" "The man by the almond tree. The one everyone calls a madman." For a moment, Cherry simply blinked. Then she laughed, short, sharp, bitter. "You're joking." "No," Luke whispered. His eyes didn't waver. "You're taking lessons from a madman." Cherry's voice cracked like a whip. "He's taught me more than any teacher or private tutor," Luke said firmly, though his tone was still respectful. "He's teaching me to read with understanding, to think." "You're trying to embarrass me." Cherry's voice dropped, low and sharp. She stepped closer. "Boy, what's wrong with you?" "Mom," Luke muttered, steady but trembling. "You taught me not to look down on people." Cherry's eyes flashed. "And I also taught you to reach the sky, because that's where the stars shine. But you're crawling in the dirt, in filth where no one wants to walk." Luke's jaw clenched. He tried to hold it in, but the words erupted. "From the ground, everything begins. Maybe I need to start there, to grow my wings before I soar." Cherry froze, her lips pressed thin. She turned without another word and walked away. From that day onward, Luke committed himself entirely to Morris's lessons. Morning and evening, beneath the almond tree, they read, memorized, and debated. The boy, once mocked for failing at everything, now studied his textbooks with passion. While Morris fed his brain, Luke made certain he would never again wonder where his next meal might come from. Each morning he arrived with breakfast, at noon with lunch, and by evening, he pressed money into Morris's hand, making sure there was always dinner. Luke would often sit and share a meal with Morris. One lunchtime, as Luke handed him 2 patties and a cocoa bread, Morris's lips curved into a knowing smile. "Mens sana in corpore sano," he said, his voice calm, almost reverent. Luke blinked, caught off guard. "What does that mean?" Morris leaned back against the almond tree, eyes thoughtful. "It's Latin. Translated, it means a healthy mind in a healthy body." The words struck Luke with unexpected force, lingering long after the food was finished. In that moment, beneath the midday sun and the chatter of passing students, the phrase rooted itself in him, a quiet mantra, a cornerstone of the drive that would shape his days. Yet the more determined he became, the more intense the ridicule grew. Richard was leading the sneering crowd. Then another video appeared online, Luke sitting with Morris, its caption dripping with cruelty. "Rich boy eats food from the garbage bin with the madman." Laughter echoed through the corridors. Teachers whispered behind closed doors. And soon the rumors spread like wildfire. Luke wasn't just eating with the madman. He was living with him. By then, every glance carried suspicion, every silence a sting, until the very air at Portland High seemed poisoned against him. One morning, rain forced Luke under Morris's leaking shack. By the time he arrived at school, drenched to the skin, Richard had already made sure everyone believed the rumor. They jeered as Luke walked past, leaving puddles on the classroom floor, but he did not break. At break time, he sat alone, uniform still damp, textbooks open, pen in hand. His classmates laughed. Richard strolled by, grinning, whispering insults. Luke didn't even lift his head. Inside him, Morris's lessons, steeped in the wisdom of Garveyism, rang like scripture. You can only be destroyed by yourselves, from within, not from without. Victory is won from within, and can only be lost from within. Let no voice but your own speak from the depths. Hear all, but attend only to what truly matters. Luke bent his head over the page, calm, unshaken. The pen no longer felt ordinary. It was his weapon, his shield, the tool that would silence every mockery and lead him to triumph in the world of learning. Weeks of discipline, focus, and tireless devotion to study had finally begun to show. And when the semester ended, the report cards told the story. For the first time, Luke's name was not at the bottom. His grades had climbed. Not perfect, not even close, but enough to shock every teacher who had written him off. Enough to silence the laughter for a moment. Cherry read the report, her eyes darting over the numbers, her lips parting slightly. Improvement, real improvement. She looked at her son with something she hadn't had in years, pride. And Luke, standing taller than before, thought only of Morris's words. Read, learn, rise. The ground is only the beginning. With Morris's help, Luke threw himself into his studies. While some students mocked him, the teachers could not ignore the change. The arrogance was gone, replaced by quiet integrity and discipline. He devoured his textbooks as if he was starving for knowledge, and soon he moved beyond the classroom books, reading philosophy, history, and the works of Marcus Garvey, which he held almost sacred. Morris had taught him not just to read with understanding, but to grasp the fundamental principle of learning, to listen deeply, for learning is as much about hearing as it is about seeing. One afternoon, as Luke sat under the almond tree with a notebook in hand, Morris leaned forward, his eyes burning with conviction. "Luke," he said firmly, "never forget this. The pen is mightier than the sword. Armies can conquer land, but ideas, written, preserved, and carried, can conquer generations. Knowledge is your true weapon. With it, you'll defend your legacy, your dignity, and your future." Luke tightened his grip on the pen in his hand. It didn't feel like just an object. It felt like power. Every evening, Luke tested himself, asking questions, solving problems, measuring his own progress. His mother still thought she was watching him struggle. Only Morris knew the full depth of his transformation. Each afternoon, under the almond tree, its shade became a classroom. Luke read, wrote, debated, and answered questions he had never attempted before. One overcast afternoon, Luke was summoned to the principal's office. "Luke, we've received concerns about your time with the Madman," she said. "He's teaching me," Luke replied evenly. "He's insane," the principal insisted. "It's dangerous." Luke's eyes hardened. "So are motor vehicles, and we still drive in them. Not to criticize the school, but the so-called madman has taught me more than any of the sane teachers ever did." "I'm going to tell your mother," the principal said. "She already knows," Luke said calmly. The principal had no reply. That afternoon, the sky hung heavy and gray, but inside Luke, something brightened. He met Morris beneath the almond tree. The man's eyes were sharp, piercing, filled with a quiet authority. "Most people pursue education for employment," Morris said. "They study to pass exams, to remember what someone told them. That is not true learning." Luke was silent, absorbing every word. "You've begun the process," Morris continued, leaning forward, voice low but intense. "But you must understand the true purpose of learning. Education is more than a tool for progress. It is the foundation of dignity, freedom, and the holistic development of a human being." Morris stood and paced slowly, each step deliberate. Luke's eyes followed him, as if willing him to continue. "I'm listening," he muttered. "Bob Marley once sang, 'Give us the teachings of His Majesty.' Do you know the song?" Morris asked. "Yes," Luke nodded eagerly. "Bob Marley, One Drop." "Good. Here is one drop of Haile Selassie's teaching," Morris said, his voice steady, reflecting his vision on material success versus human values. He sat back down. Education develops the intellect, and the intellect distinguishes man from other creatures. It is education that enables man to harness nature and utilize her resources for the well-being and improvement of his life. The key for the betterment and completeness of modern living is education. But man cannot live by bread alone. Man, after all, is composed of intellect and soul. Therefore, education in general, and higher education in particular, must aim to provide, beyond the physical, nourishment for the intellect and soul. Any education that ignores man's intrinsic nature, neglecting his reasoning and intellect, cannot be called true education. Luke absorbed every word. Another gear shifted inside him. His academic and personal growth accelerated. He no longer sat passively in class as if learning was beyond him. He was focused, disciplined, and curious. Teachers, at first bewildered, watched the transformation of the once arrogant, disruptive boy who had seemed barely able to read. Now he led his class, wrote articulately, read fluently, and asked intellectually rigorous questions. One day, during history, he raised his hand. "Miss, why does the textbook cite that slavery ended with the Emancipation Act of 1833? That act only abolished the slavery of children under 6. What about the adults? The so-called apprentices, who remained chattels under the apprenticeship system?" The room fell silent. The teacher blinked, momentarily at a loss for words. "Luke, yes, that's correct," she said, her voice low, tinged with disbelief. She turned to the class. "Take note. Textbooks say slavery ended in 1833, but that's a simplification. Legally, that's when Parliament passed the act. But in reality, most enslaved people weren't truly free until 1838. A few days later, in geography class, as the teacher pinned a map to the chalkboard, Luke leaned forward. He recognized it instantly, Mercator's projection. Rising to his feet, he spoke. "Sir, this map distorts the world. It's no coincidence they call it the Greenland problem. Here, Greenland looks almost as large as South America, yet South America is more than 8 times bigger. Alaska appears larger than Mexico, but Mexico is in fact nearly 3 times the size. And Africa, look at it. On this map, it seems close to Europe in scale, when in reality, Africa is more than twice the size of Europe. And notice this, America is placed at the center of the world. These distortions aren't neutral. They come from a worldview, a legacy of Eurocentrism. Why then is this map part of our curriculum? Are we truly being educated, or are we being indoctrinated?" The teacher froze, mouth open in disbelief, glancing at the other students, some wide-eyed, some snickering. "Your point is accurate, Luke, but remember," he hesitated, his fingers tightening on the geography textbook. "Well, it's just that..." His voice faltered as he searched for words, the Mercator projection suddenly feeling insufficient to explain the centuries of bias Luke had just unraveled. Luke's eyes didn't leave the map. "Sir, it's not just about the projection or the tools we use," he said quietly, but with the calm certainty of someone who had thought it through. "It's about how the education, or should I say the miseducation, shapes the way we see the world, and who decides what counts as the acceptable standard." A ripple of murmurs ran through the classroom. Even the teacher's composure had shifted. He nodded slowly, conceding, almost unwillingly, to the truth in Luke's words. From those moments, everyone knew Luke wasn't just the rich kid anymore. He had become someone entirely different. Teachers admired his confidence and intellect. Morris continued his relentless mentorship. Mornings spent recapping lessons, evenings devoted to reading. He was shaping Luke into more than a scholar. He was cultivating a person of purpose. Luke reread his textbooks tirelessly, caring little for the whispers of classmates or the mockery of peers. He knew who he was becoming, and he knew who had guided him there. But not everyone welcomed this change. One overcast afternoon, Richard gathered a few friends and hurled stones at Morris. When Morris ran, they destroyed his shack, leaving the place in ruins. The attack was cruel, but it could not touch the bond between teacher and student or the transformation that was already underway in Luke. The next morning, Luke found Morris repairing his battered shack. "They stoned you and destroyed your house," he said, anger restrained but burning, "because they hate my progress. They want you to stop teaching me. I'll speak to my mom. He placed a hand on Morris's shoulder. Morris nodded silently, a faint smile tugging at his lips. After school, Luke walked into his mother's office, gripping the envelope with his end-of-term results. He handed it to her. Cherry glanced up, her eyes narrowing slightly, then tore the envelope open. As she scanned the grades, her jaw dropped. Impossible. 75% in math. Luke's lowest score. Every other subject in the 90s. English, 98%. The boy who had been at the bottom of his class was now at the very top. Cherry reread the pages, stunned by the teacher's comments and numerical proof. Most improved student, first place in class, highest grades across the entire school. Am I dreaming? She muttered, eyes flicking between Luke and the paper. How did this happen? She asked, voice tight with disbelief. Luke hesitated, then said clearly, Morris, the madman. Silence fell. Cherry got up, stepping closer, her voice low but full of awe. You're telling me the madman tutored you into the son I always hoped you'd be. Memories flickered, the whispers at school, the video, the rumors. But now she felt relief and pride. She had trusted her instinct, letting Luke continue his lessons with Morris. Let's go, she said urgently. She drove straight to Morris's shack. When they arrived, Morris was still repairing the damaged shack. Hands dirty, clothes tattered. He looked up and a warm smile spread across his face. Morris, Luke called, gesturing proudly. This is my mom, Cherry. Morris approached briskly. Hello, Miss Cherry, he said, waving. So nice to meet the mother of this respectful and brilliant boy. For a moment, Cherry froze. The man standing before her son, the dirt, the grime, the threadbare clothes, the stench of poverty, was someone beneath her dignity. She had built her world on control, on polish and prestige. Yet here was a ragged figure she would instinctively dismiss, commanding Luke's unshakable respect. Luke's eyes met hers, burning with recognition, and she understood. Dignity lay not in wealth, but in wisdom. In that gaze, Cherry saw a character her money could never purchase. Slowly, almost reverently, she extended her hand, and Morris hesitated, wiping his calloused, dirt-stained palm against his worn trousers. Shame flickered across his face, but Cherry didn't hesitate. She clasped his rough hand firmly, holding it not with scorn, but with respect, like a partner sealing a deal. In that simple gesture, she honored the man who had given her son what wealth alone could not buy. She held his weathered, dirt-stained hand, gripping it tightly as though it were a lifeline. Her voice dropped to a trembling whisper. Thank you for bringing out that brilliance in him. For a moment, Morris stood frozen. That single touch, firm, unwavering, cut through years of scorn, ridicule, and abandonment. The world had called him mad, useless, forgotten. But in Cherry's grip, he felt something he had not known in decades. Dignity, respect, the acknowledgement that his mind, not his rags, defined him. And to Luke, watching silently, it was as if two worlds, wealth and ruin, privilege and rejection, were bound together in that handshake, sealing a truth that would change them all. Cherry squeezed Morris's hand briefly, feeling a silent reassurance in the contact, and thought to herself, if only Robert were here. But perhaps this is the next best thing. Her heart swelled with gratitude, her eyes glistening as she looked at him. Though unlikely, Morris had become the father figure she had always wished Luke could have. I owe you big time, she exclaimed, her voice carrying both relief and reverence. No, Mom, Morris said softly, his tone steady but humble. You don't owe me a thing. What I gave your son was freely given, because knowledge, once shared, belongs to the world, not to me. Yes, she insisted, her voice firm, eyes unblinking. I do. I cannot allow a man who has done so much for my son to spend another night in this place, or to keep living like this. Forgive me for being blunt, but you deserve better. No need to apologize, he said. I like people who speak plainly. Please, come with us, Cherry said, her tone gentle but firm. Morris hesitated. Luke leaned forward, nodding encouragingly. Morris, he said, please come with us. For the first time, the madman smiled without reservation. Luke opened the car door, and Morris stepped in hesitantly. The leather seats felt alien beneath him, soft, unfamiliar, yet somehow safe. He glanced at Luke, who climbed in after him, sitting quietly, hands folded over his knees. Luke's heart swelled with awe, gratitude, and a flicker of disbelief. This was the man who had reshaped his world, and now he was here, beside him, sharing in a new chapter neither of them could have imagined. Cherry started the car, glancing at both of them in the rearview mirror. "You two," she said softly. "We have a long road ahead, but I think we're ready for it." Luke exhaled, a mixture of relief and determination washing over him. For the first time, he felt fully seen, not for his wealth, his name, or his privilege, but for the mind and character he had fought to build. Outside, the sun began to set, peeking through the clouds, casting golden streaks that glinted off the wet streets. The world seemed to pause for a moment, as if acknowledging the quiet triumph within the car. A privileged boy transformed, a madman redeemed, and a mother finally witnessing the brilliance she had longed for. Cherry led Morris to a beautiful one-bedroom house, one of her many properties, a home, a sanctuary no one had imagined he could have. Luke followed, watching silently as his mother showed Morris the rooms, the bedroom, the kitchen, the bathroom. Morris stood frozen, eyes wide, disbelief etched on his face. Cherry smiled warmly. "This is yours now. Your work with Luke saved him, and now it's time you have what you truly deserve." That evening, after Cherry had left, Luke stayed back with Morris. They sat on the veranda in the fading light. Morris stared at the ground, silent for so long that Luke finally broke the quiet. "You never told me the rest," he said. "Why didn't you go to university?" Morris's face darkened, his voice low and ragged. "My mother cried out, 'Wicked Willie, you obey me son,' and mad him. And maybe she was right. My uncle swore I'd never outshine his boy. Within days, my mind betrayed me. One morning I was ready for university. The next, I couldn't even hold a single thought." His shoulders sagged, the weight of years pressing down. "Everything I had, every prize, every promise, vanished, and the world called me mad." He fixed his eyes on Luke, fierce again. "That's why I teach you, boy, because brilliance wasted is the cruelest curse of all, and I will not see it happen again." In the following days, Cherry took Morris to a barber, bought him clean clothes, and accompanied him to a private doctor. Every week, she delivered a generous food supply and checked on him, ensuring he was comfortable and settled. Luke watched quietly, grateful, seeing Morris laugh freely for the first time in years. It wasn't charity, it was dignity and respect. For Luke, witnessing Morris's transformation from a man who once lived in a dilapidated, ramshackle, mud and scrap shack, walls barely holding together, floor caked with years of grime, and a roof that offered little protection from wind and rain, to someone cared for, respected, and dignified, was a lesson as powerful as any he had learned under the almond tree. It struck him then, there are some things money can never buy. Courage, compassion, and the willingness to uplift others stand far greater than wealth, privilege, or status. The contrast between Morris's past hardship and his new life under Cherry's care made Luke see, more clearly than ever, the real meaning of human worth and the transformative power of knowledge, respect, and kindness. A year later, Cherry and Morris accompanied Luke to school. This morning was unlike any other. It was the first day of his CXC examinations. Cherry hugged him tightly, pride radiating from her, and Luke felt the weight of her expectations, almost enough to unnerve him. As the wind rustled the almond tree in the distance, his eyes caught its swaying branches. He reflected on Garvey's philosophy of empowerment, reminding himself that true success begins with inner strength and self-belief. Morris smiled and nodded approvingly, a quiet pride shining in his eyes. He had seen Luke's journey from arrogance and struggle to focus and brilliance, and in that simple gesture, he acknowledged the young man Luke had become, confident, disciplined, and ready to claim his own path in the world. The afternoon after his final exam, Luke wandered back to the almond tree. The branches swayed in the breeze, just as they had the first day Morris spoke Garvey's words. He rested his palm against the rough bark, whispering to himself, If you have no confidence in yourself, you are twice defeated in the race of life. With confidence, you have won even before you have started. For the first time, the words felt fully his own. The boy who once mocked learning now stood rooted in it like the tree itself, firm, growing, unshaken. Now Luke no longer feared failure. He saw himself not as a chin, not as an heir, but as a boy destined for greatness. The day the exam results arrived, Cherry tore open the envelope. Her eyes widened, and then she screamed, leapt, spun, and danced across the room, clutching Luke to her chest. The boy who had once failed every test had conquered them all, earning the highest honors in every subject. Luke didn't shout or leap. He only gripped the paper tighter, hearing Morris's voice echo in his mind. Victory is won from within and can only be lost from within. At last, he believed it. At last, it was his. And then, like a final seal upon his triumph, Garvey's words rose within him. You can accomplish what you will. Morris stood nearby, a quiet smile on his weathered face. No applause, no fanfare, just the deep satisfaction of a mission fulfilled. Between the two people who had shaped him, Morris, the madman who taught him to read with understanding, to think, to memorize, and to strive, and Cherry, the mother who demanded his best, Luke finally understood. Greatness was not inherited, but earned. The lessons under the almond tree had transformed him forever. The almond tree still stood near the school, roots deep, branches wide, sheltering all who passed. On the day of his graduation, Luke smiled as he drove past it, knowing his own roots had finally taken hold. Greatness, he realized, was not inherited, but cultivated, grown through self-discipline. If you enjoyed the story, show some love. Like, comment, and subscribe to Words, Sound, and Story, where Troy McKenzie transforms real-life experiences into meaningful, dramatic, and entertaining tales. Thanks for watching. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. Bless up.